Oh, look at the camera, and when the rabbi starts talking,
I should
we'll
look
look
at
at
the camera.
Yeah, but then look at the rabbi when he starts talking.
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmer, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com. Mark, welcome. We have a very, very special guest with us today, Assemblyman Karim Camara. Can I call you Karim? Can I
Please,
first
by
name?
all means. Karim,
very
that's
good.
what my
Now, you're
mother
very
named me.
super special because you are the representative of the Crown Heights district in Brooklyn, and that's where Lubavitch Chabad headquarters, which I'm a part of, is at their headquarters. So really, you're not just assemblyman for that specific area in Crown Heights, you're really the assemblyman for the entire Lubavitch Chabad movement around the world. So therefore, you're very special to us, especially.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to represent the Lubavitch Chabad movement. Now, you just put a lot of pressure on me saying I represent it throughout the world, but I realize that is a holy place in Crown Heights, and I appreciate the contributions the movement has made to the community since the 70s, since people started fleeing from Crown Heights. They've been there to provide stability, and now we're at a great place in terms of the growth of the community.
I think that's an important point. I just want to emphasize it to the audience because you always get these headlines, oh, there's black-Jewish tensions, but why don't you look at the good side? And here we have, and I want you to attest to it, that here's a community, and I think it's the most integrated community in the United States. I read that somewhere. And, all right, 99% of the time, which, listen, nobody's perfect, 99% of the time that the blacks and the Jews really get together and work hand in hand. So they talk about how you're working with the Jewish community in Crown Heights.
Right, yes, without question. Very diverse community, from having individuals who are Jewish to Caribbean American, African American, Haitian American. The way the community has been gentrified, you have newer whites who have moved in. Very diverse, but by the same token, we've been unified. Of course, there have been troubled times in the past, but now when you look at leaders, anytime there's an incident which seems like there's a problem, whether it was an individual who happened to be Jewish who's a victim of violence, somebody who's African American who's a victim of violence, we come together as a community, black leaders, Jewish leaders, Muslim leaders, Christian leaders, and say we're unified, we can work through the problems without outside forces trying to attack negative connotations over incidents from the past. We've been very, very unified over the past 8 years that I can recall since I've been in office.
How do you sort of interact with the Jewish community? What do you do? Do you go to the sukkahs? Do you go to, have you had to learn a whole new language? I mean, talk to us about.
One thing I've not learned is the language, but I'm open to that, learning the language. But I've gone to the sukkahs. I've been to the many individuals who invite me to their homes for whether it's weddings or sukkahs or other high holy days. During the sukkah, I go to individuals' homes and I go out on Kingston Avenue and I address the crowd. That's one of the highlights of the year. I've even danced before, and I was dancing once, and at first reluctantly, then I got into the moment, enjoyed it. Then someone, in the spur of the moment, took the hat and put it on my head. So I was part of the movement for about 60 seconds. I was a Jew during that period of time. So that was an honor. But that's it. It's really what people want, whatever their ethnicity. They want to make sure their elected leaders respect them, take time to get to understand them, and are sensitive to the issues they're faced with. So many individuals have my cell phone, and they'll call me if there's a problem, or maybe it's just sitting down for a cup of coffee. This summer, we're going to have office hours on Kingston Avenue because we are on Union Street, and sometimes it's difficult for somebody to go, even though we're 5-6 blocks away, sometimes to be right there when someone's coming home from work or on their way to work, or take a moment out of their day to say, you know what, you can't make it to us. We're going to come here to you in the community.
What's your biggest piece of advice for someone in terms of safety? I mean, are you fearful of walking around Crown Heights after 10 p.m.? No,
I'm not afraid. For the most part, the community has been safe. What I would say, though, in any urban area, there are times, unfortunately, where an individual becomes the victim of violence or a crime or robbery. I believe individuals should not walk alone, particularly women and, of course, children. They should walk in pairs. By the same token, we have the community has a good relationship with the 71st Precinct, the monthly meetings of the 71st Precinct Community Council. individuals have an opportunity to go to the meetings and find out things, whether there's a wave of car break-ins. Recently, there's been a wave of people snatching telephones, cell phone. Someone's getting off the train. As soon as you get off the train, you want to check your text messages and somebody comes and grabs it and things like that. But be alert, be vigilant, but for the most part, it is a safe community. We're at a good place overall in terms of safety, but you can never be too cautious.
What's the biggest piece of legislation that you had a chance to pass for the Lubavitch community that maybe you had to increase your learning curve to understand that issue a little bit better?
Well, you know, one of the challenges about the current dynamics of Albany is that, you know, as we learned in civics class, you'd have a great piece of legislation that has to make it through the Assembly and then through the Senate, and the governor has to sign it into law. So some of the things that we wanted to do that would be helpful to the community overall, we were not able to get to the Senate. But we have legislation that would help, whether it's funding for a particular area. We have the Bedford Armory there now. So there, from legislation to programmatic funding, the things that we've had difficulty. We have helped tremendously with funding for local programs, and which has been the Crown Heights Jewish Community Council is a program we work with directly, and we've been able to provide funding for community projects and things of that nature.
You know, you mentioned funding and community projects, and you know, I've been around long enough in the Capitol where I remember member items. So they don't have member items anymore. So how do you get community projects funded without going through this member item process?
Right. Well, that's something that I think has really been a tragedy to the community overall. Because we had an opportunity as legislators who know an area, we work with community leaders, we work with the precinct councils, we work with the Jewish Community Council, we work with African American clergy leaders, and we make recommendations for grants. They've gone to soup kitchens, they've gone to youth programs, we did graffiti removal on Notion Avenue. One of the reasons why Notion Avenue is on the rise, because we did 4 years ago, we identified funding, we gave it to the Crown Heights North Association, and we paid for a vendor to remove the graffiti. When we were talking to Connecticut Muffin 6-7 years ago, as a well-known coffee shop, they didn't want to come on to Notion Avenue. If you're moving into a neighborhood and you see graffiti, would you want to move into that neighborhood?
So it's called Connecticut Muffin?
Yes.
Not New York Muffin?
No, it's not.
The Apple Muffin is our state.
And they're Brooklyn. They're in Brooklyn too. So we removed the graffiti. Then we had this coffee shop come. Now we have 3 on Notion Avenue. So not having the member items puts us in a great disadvantage, but there's still ways to get funding directly through the state budget.
I asked the governor this. How?
Right. Well, they're not the member items, but there's still organizations that receive money from the state budget. But it's a line item in the budget. But it's just not the small amounts that were allocated based on the recommendation of individual members.
So do people from your community come to see you, and then you go to the speaker and say, I want this as a line item in the budget, and then the speaker goes into the 3 men in a room and then and says this is going to be in the budget?
For the most part, those small amounts, those grant dollars have not been in the budget. And I said that's been a tragedy, it's a travesty. I think it's an injustice to communities that as representatives in a democratic process who are being responsive to the needs of our constituents, we're not able to give those amounts.
Which would be $10,000, $15,000.
Exactly, but there are larger amounts that organizations still receive. Museums have received money.
$1 million.
The Jewish Children's Museum. It depends on, I can't say, it depends upon the organization. Some have received $100,000, some received $200,000. The organization have received a lot. The governor's done his regional economic development funding that organizations receive sometimes a few million to several $1 million. So there's still money being allocated. The member items process, to me, allowed us to have fairness so that even the organizations that didn't have lobbyists or could not afford to come to Albany, we were able to make recommendations, not based on political interest, but based on need.
And there were a few bad apples that spoiled the whole bunch.
Right.
And that's where the problem came in.
That's the problem. But to me, it's like if you find out that a doctor, is convicted of malpractice, do you say, well, I'm not going to go to the doctor? The stockbrokers who are convicted of crime, do we say, stop investing your money? So because there have been a few bad actors, that's true. We should not condone it. It's egregious. We shouldn't tolerate it. But we should not allow those good community groups to be punished based on a few bad actors.
And how long have you been in the Assembly?
8 years now.
8 years.
Yes.
How old are you?
42 years old.
Wow, you started young. Are you looking for the future, maybe the Senate or Congress or something else? Or?
Well, I don't know. I enjoy the Assembly. To me, the highlight of democracy in our country is really the state legislature. Most of the laws that impact our lives in the state legislature.
Yeah.
So I enjoy this. It's like having a job and looking too far ahead for the next job.
Okay.
When opportunities arise, you consider each one. But I'm happy serving in what they call the People's House.
That's right.
In the state
I wanted to
legislature.
go the other direction. We're talking about the problems, and Mark, of course, and both of you are correct that there are problems and they have to be corrected. But I was saying, really come back to home. I said you're the representative of Crown Heights. I actually have a few children living in Crown Heights, but this is really across the board because you want to buy a home. So a lot of people think, oh, Brooklyn, now it's like, if you don't have $1 million, you can't buy a home, and you get a garage for that. I'm just a few bedroom condo, and I always tell people, on the other hand, move up here for a few $100,000. You can have a beautiful house in the suburbs, but people don't want. They like their New York. I could see why, but to me that's too good of a problem. Obviously the people that have owned homes, they're making a good money, but the young people that want to come into the area, you can't start off a job out of college and okay, I'm ready to buy a $1 million home.
Right.
Is there any way to, maybe new housing somewhere?
Well, one of the things I really find distressing as an elected official is what we've seen over the past few years with the changes in the community. The price of living, rentals has gone up tremendously. There were individuals there who were Hasidic, individuals who were Black or West Indian, et cetera, who were the stability of the neighborhood. And then you wake up one morning and find out, well, you know what? I can't afford to live in the neighborhood my family's been for the last few decades or so. Some of the things that we could have done when the city council allows for zoning changes. The way it is now, if a building's zoned for a certain number of square feet of residential and you want to go above that, you want a variance, you have to go through the council. I think we lost opportunities in the previous administration to make sure there were affordable housing provisions. The 80-20 was just not sufficient. So we're doing all this building and we're doing market rate, and we find out people are being priced out. The cost keeps going up. We're going through regentrification now. 4 years ago, the individuals coming to my office happened to be Jewish or Black, and they were complaining about the cost of living. Now they're younger whites who moved here 4 years ago. They were college students. Now their lease is up, and they're asking, what am I doing about the gentrification? It's getting out of control now because the cost of living is becoming tremendous. I'm happy that the current administration, Mayor de Blasio, has committed to building affordable housing, building for those who are low income, middle income. We still have an opportunity, but we have to make sure if there are any taxpayer dollars, if there's any variance, then there should be strong provisions for affordable housing. So I'm really tired of hearing about constituents who say, I have to leave New York, I have to leave Brooklyn, because I just can't afford it.
Now,
I like the diversity, but I don't like the displacement that's
You were
happening.
chair of the subcommittee on retention of home ownership and stabilization of affordable housing.
Right.
What happened to that subcommittee?
Well, the subcommittees in the Assembly, unfortunately, don't have a lot of power. The subcommittees are fact-finding. They don't have any power. We don't hold hearings. In order to hold a hearing, it would have to be the chair of the Housing Committee would have to approve of it. So it's not real work. It's a stepping stone for a member during the seniority process. It's a title.
But
you
did
get
the
it.
subcommittee go away, or does it still exist?
I'm not no longer the chair of it.
Right.
No, I'm not.
But
Right.
it
So I don't
still
know who's the chair
exists?
now. I believe so. I'd have to verify
Okay,
that. I don't know
I hadn't
for sure.
heard of it until I read this on your bio.
I hadn't heard of it until I found out I was appointed to it. And I haven't heard about it since.
But you are on the housing committee.
Yes, I'm on the Housing
Okay.
Committee. Yes,
So
that's
that's
right.
a good thing.
It is. That's
know.
right. Right.
Now-
We have a great chair in Assemblyman Keith Wright.
Oh, well, yeah, the former state Democratic chair and the Manhattan County Democratic chair.
Right. Yes, that's
And
right.
He's, so that's, do you, I look at this, you talk about the member items, and I have a list here of 44 legislative bad apples, I call them. Because it's not really corrupt, it's not really, they didn't all go to jail.
Right.
But 44 people did something that wasn't 100% kosher. So what's going, and a lot of it's, I go back to 1975 with this, but most of them happened 2000 and later. So what happened since the year 2000?
No, he's
That-
only here for 8 years.
Well, I know,
right.
but he's still involved. He was still involved with politics before that,
Right.
and he still understands the culture. So, what do you think happened since 2000 that all of these started to speed up? Like, you know, every year, and then more than one a year, and more than one in a year, and just
Right.
amazing how many people were convicted or pleaded guilty to a crime since 2000.
Right. I can't speak to individuals' actions.
No, I know that.
But you know, it is fortunate. Obviously, the system works. If we found out about this in the Assembly, they have a great process, Ways and Means. When we did have member items, there is a group of individuals who scrutinize the nonprofit. They determine whether they are registered with the Department of State,
Right.
whether they're registered with the Charities Bureau,
Right.
whether they have their 501c3. They give extensive background checks and the times when they stop funding from happening. Like anything, you have those people, even when you have laws in place, who try to game the system to their advantage.
Okay,
So I'm
but-
glad we found out about them, and I commend
And these
whether
aren't all just
prosecutors or individuals who find out about that and punish those people if they did do anything wrong, if they did break the law.
Well, this wasn't all about member items, by the way, but I just
Right,
wanted
right.
to,
Yeah.
I just, you know, I spoke with Senator Ruth Hassel Thompson, who you're friendly with,
Right.
and she said that it's because of the ethics reforms that no one was grandfathered in. So even though they thought they were doing things the proper way at the time, now you look at it with the new ethics reforms, and now everyone did something bad before, and then they got busted for that. Is that something that you would agree with, that it was the ethics reforms that went on in the 2000s?
Well, again, I think you have to look
that
at
caught
each
people?
individual case.
Well-
And there is higher scrutiny now, and it's not a problem. If you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't have a problem with the scrutiny. And unfortunately, there have been a number of members, as you mentioned, you said since '75, over the last few years, there have been several members who have been accused of or convicted of wrongdoing. And that's unfortunate. Unfortunately, it puts a negative stain on the rest of the elected officials who are doing great things.
Oh, yeah, and most- and-
the overwhelming majority
Yeah,
are. As
yeah,
I said,
absolutely.
in any profession, you know, I challenge anyone. I reached out to the National Association of Journalists, the National Bar Association, to find out the percentage of individuals, of their members, who have been accused of and convicted of a crime. They said they don't keep the records, but I bet you that the number of people, as in any profession, you have individuals, unfortunately, who try to use the system for their own gain.
Well, and you said that about doctors, and, you know, if you have a few bad doctors and you take away their license, you shouldn't take away everyone's license, and you shouldn't peg every doctor as being bad. So
Right.
I agree with your assessment
Right.
with that. So I just wanted to,
Right.
you know, let you know that we're putting it in perspective.
No, and I appreciate that.
And I'm not trying to damn everyone.
Right,
But
right.
I am trying to just point some, you know,
Yeah.
some of this out, you know.
It's
just-
tragic. You know, these are people who you work with, people you know, people you sat next to, and you wake up one morning and there's a headline, they're no longer here. So it's very, very unfortunate. And one thing I do hope is that it doesn't dissuade those individuals from being involved in the civic process, that wherever they are in the state, that they still take an opportunity to be involved in the democratic process.
Do you
because
agree?
That helps.
Do you agree with term limits?
I do agree with term limits. I think that when I first came here, one of the first things I did, I introduced legislation that would expand the term to 4 years and limit it to 3 4-year terms, which would be a total of 12 years.
Okay. Are you
Yes.
going to hold to that personally?
Well, people say that. I don't think it's
No,
not
Senator Greg Ball
Right.
held to it personally.
right.
So I just wanted to
Right.
ask you that.
The way I
Just-
look at it, if you have two boxers and there's one boxer that advocates a certain type of glove, and he doesn't have that certain type of glove, and you're going to tell him, well, you're advocating for that glove. Why don't you use that glove, even though your opponent is using another glove that he has an advantage
Well, that
over?
they say with
So-
campaign financing. They
Right.
say that, yes, I like this version of campaign financing once it's passed and everyone can use it, but I'm not going to live under those rules while everyone else is not.
Which is very
so
much
I
true.
understand.
Which is very much true. And the other thing is, when I say term limits, I'm not those people that say an individual stayed longer, they're no good, they're professionals. The people here like Assemblyman Dick Godfrey,
Yes.
like Denny Farrell,
Yes.
like the Speaker, like Joe Lintal. Rhoda Jacobs is just retired after
Right.
38 years. The people who've been here long who still maintain a passion for their service. They're still very capable. They still have the same vigor they had. I think for the system, I think it's better for the system if there was a turnover every 12 years of new members, if it was staggered.
And there's something to be said for institutional memory.
Right, that's true.
Which is why you need some of the Dick Gottfrieds around.
That's right.
So that, you just don't keep making the same mistakes over
right.
and over.
So I understand there are arguments on both sides.
That's right.
I worked in the nonprofit sector for my professional life before I was in the Assembly, and I thought it was healthy for boards to have new energy. Look at the New York City Council.
Yes.
When you look at some of the people locally, we have now a Councilwoman Lori Cumbo and Councilwoman Jamani Williams and Robert Cornegie and other dynamic members of the council who perhaps would not have an opportunity if it was not for term limits. So we have new ideas, we have fresh ideas
and you never
that contribute to the body.
You never sat on the city council.
Never sat on the council, no.
So, there are a lot of assemblymen who do move on to the city council.
That's true.
It pays more than the state assembly,
Yes.
and you don't have to travel as much, and you could be home with your family more.
That's right.
Sound
That sounds
good
very
to you?
attractive, those three
Sounds-
things. All sound very attractive.
Sound good to you? Who's your who's your city councilman?
My councilman was just elected, Councilman Robert Cornegie, who's doing a great job, who I support, and I know he'll be there
For
for
at least
8
the next
years.
8 years.
Right, serving with distinction.
And then you'll be
Right.
50, and maybe, this
And
is
maybe in my rocking chair,
hey,
voting
50's
for.
not so bad.
That's still young.
So, I want to ask you something respectfully, and I mean this respectfully. And if I don't have it correct, I'm so sorry. But did you have a problem with DWI, or that you were accused of something like that?
Accused of, yes.
Accused of. Okay,
Right.
That's why I'm saying I'm taking
Right.
it gently because I
Right.
didn't know.
No, I understand
What
that. yes.
happened? What can you just tell us what
Well,
happened?
just in short, I'm glad. It's still, a very troubling experience, but I'm glad that the court agreed it was not a DWI. Finally, it was equivalent to a speeding ticket. It was a very troubling case where you have a police officer who had a videotape that was destroyed. You had a police officer who said he had a gut feeling that I was arrogant. So it was there are a lot of things that I can say in Albany County that would shock people throughout the rest of the state.
Is that where it happened?
Yes.
Albany County?
Right, yes. That would shock people in terms of how the police treat particularly people of color. And I don't use those words lightly,
No,
but
you
I
don't.
say
I
it with
know.
conviction that the many people of color here, I found out since I've been chair of the caucus, regarding issues of justice here in Albany County. So that was a very troubled moment, but it was something that I think I learned from, I grew from, and made me a stronger
and
individual.
it was resolved and dismissed, and nothing happened, or what was
Right.
the result?
The result was, as I mentioned, was equivalent to a speeding ticket. It was a violation, but there's no criminal charges involved.
This
Okay,
interesting
well,
idea.
stay clean, and that's
Yeah,
all. I'm
well,
sorry that you had the problem here in Albany
Right.
County, but
Right.
I
It's
just really
just,
didn't remember. I didn't know
I-
about it. I just wanted
One
to
of the
ask.
10
okay.
jobs I have is with visit Jewish prisoners, but since the state allows anybody in, I do have a lot of African American inmates who, I don't know if they want to be Jewish, they come to my services, bottom line. And so a little bit, I know from the inside, I'm not a sociologist working for the state, but I just see that there's just so many African Americans, and I talk to them about their cases, and it's a little bit what you say, that if you're African American, you're probably a criminal, you're doing something wrong.
Right.
And there's an overabundance of African Americans, and just for
Right.
things that I know other people would get. Yeah, I mean, a crime's a crime, but
Right.
there's, like you say, there's a gray area, and
Very
you
much
could
so.
always look, okay, I bet you did something wrong, like what you're saying. So I think it is an issue.
Yeah, and I say, at least in New York City, I'm not familiar with enough officers in Albany County to say it. In New York City, I really feel the overwhelming majority of the officers, I appreciate the fact they're putting their life on the line, their courage, their bravery. The overwhelming number are obeying the law, not just the law, but the regulations, they're going by the book. But we do have some serious problems in law enforcement. When you look at the disparities in arrests, when you look at the stop and frisk numbers, where the individuals who are stopped and frisked, not because they have the suspicion they committed a crime or fit the description of somebody who committed a crime, but because their pants are hanging down, they have on a cap, they have on a hoodie. We look at the marijuana arrest laws, and many reliable studies that say that younger white high school students, wealthier, smoke much more marijuana than African Americans, but the arrest numbers, the 30,000 plus a year arrested are African American. They're not just getting a summons. If you have it in your pocket, it should be a summons. Why not have it a summons, whether it's in your pocket, if it's in your book bag, it's a summons. If it falls out of your book bag on the street, it becomes a misdemeanor. Does it make sense? No. It's a small amount. It's not mean you're legalizing it. you're still not tolerating it, give them a summons, have them pay a fine. Subsequently, each time you can make it more excessive, the charge. But we have a lot of problems with our system of law enforcement and criminal justice that is not just about the individual. I think in the long term, it's a detriment of the community because you give this person a record, now they have trouble finishing school, they can't get a student loan, they have trouble getting a job. So we're basically saying we want to keep you on the fringes, we want to keep you on the street, and we want you to be involved in illegal activity.
Now,
so we've got a lot of work to do.
A little bit of trivia about you is that you're a Baptist minister?
Yes, I was ordained a Baptist minister. Now I happen to pastor a non-denominational independent church.
Do you go up and give the opening prayer?
Oh, but here at Albany, I have done it before.
You've given
I've
the
given
opening
prayer in the past. I've not done it this session. I've given the invocation, the State of the State this year, which was a great pleasure and honor.
You get $100 for giving.
I don't, no. Just for the record, make sure you keep that in your notes.
That's right.
I did not receive any compensation for giving the opening prayer.
Rabbi Simon, you
did not
did.
request or receive any compensation. I did it as a proud elected official.
You just don't sign that form for the voucher for the $100, but there is an honorarium.
Yes, I understand that. And I think those individuals,
I like teasing
besides
you.
me,
I'm sorry,
who've been here, they deserve that honorarium. I'm glad that they received it.
Well, I mean, a rabbi, a minister is like, oh my gosh, I'm out of my league here.
We got a good club here. Newspaper reporter.
So you said you were chair of the caucus.
Yeah.
Can you go into more detail for our audience as to what that means?
Sure. Well, we have a legislative caucus. It's called the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus.
And you're in charge of it?
And I happen to, yes, be the chair of it, yes, which is a pleasure and honor. Basil Patterson, who was the father of the lieutenant governor, late father, he has a memorial service for the former governor David Patterson, and Percy Sutton, Charlie Rangel, Congressman Charlie Rangel, were some of the founders of it. And it started because at the time they felt that there was not enough representation of people of color in leadership. So at that time in the 60s, they walked down to the Speaker's office. They called it the Midnight Walk. And from then, we've been advocating, not just now, of course, for people of color, but for people who are poor, people who are disenfranchised, who don't have a voice at the table. We want to be the voice of those people. We do the budget, we do legislation to say that it should be fair, it should be representative of all of the people of the state of New York.
And the speaker is very good at it.
Yes.
I mean, I could see how he tries to manage the black and white issue as well as the upstate downstate issue in leadership positions and things like that. I mean, I haven't seen such magic done in so many years. I've been here 34 years, so
that's a great. Speaker Silver makes our job as caucus members easy. He's been a progressive voice. This year, it was phenomenal for us to give 1.2 billion towards education, 340 million towards universal pre-kindergarten. Some of the things we wanted to do was stopped in the Republican-led Senate when it comes to some criminal justice reforms. But he's been a great champion and a great voice for the community.
Quick question: SAFE Act. How do you, or unsafe Act, depending on who you talk to? But how do you fall on that? Did you vote for it? Or?
I voted for it. That's one of the things when we talk about party line and Democrat and Republican and conservative and liberal. That it's unfortunate that we can't have a sane dialogue regarding gun legislation. Those individuals who are hunters, I had spent some of my formative years upstate New York in Orange County, and on the property the people came up who hunted deer and raccoon and things like that. I ate venison. At 12 years old, I remember eating venison for the first time. So we respect that. We respect the Second Amendment. But we have to find a way to keep guns out of the hands of people who don't need them. This young man just recently in California who several people lost their lives by somebody who legally owned a gun but should not have owned a gun. Is it a violation of Second Amendment rights to require a background check, to have mental fitness, to say that if you own the gun that you should register the gun and not be able to just sell the gun to somebody else without any type of restriction?
Okay. So there are parts of it you don't like, but parts of it that you like that enough where you had to vote for it.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. So I think we're out of time.
We're out of time. It was really great talking to you, and I feel like you're my assemblyman because from Crown Heights. So I want to thank you very much and wish you, you're a young man, so that you should have continued success and, of course, with good health. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Great pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.